the shuttle touched down on Caltris with a hard jolt. The ground crew wasted no time, signaling us out of the cramped transport and onto the barren surface. It wasn't what I had expected. Caltris was nothing like the planets I'd visited before. The atmosphere was thick, the gravity oppressive, and the air had a tangible weight. A thin film of dust clung to everything, and the horizon was bleak, jagged with hostile terrain. I'd been called here for one reason, to help solve a communication problem. On any normal planet, this wouldn't be a big deal. But Caltris wasn't normal, it was a death world. Every noise here could trigger a deadly response, and our standard tech was all but useless. Marcus Thorne, a voice cut through the whine of the cooling thrusters. I turned to see Commander Harkins approaching. His posture was stiff, his face creased with lines of exhaustion. "Glad to have you aboard. I hope you're ready for what we're dealing with." "I've been briefed," I said, hefting my pack onto my shoulder. "But seeing it for myself is something else." Harkins nodded, eyes sweeping over the desolate landscape. "You've only seen the surface. The real danger comes when we try to communicate. That's where you come in. Your background in sound analysis and alien languages makes you our best bet." I followed him toward the base. A cluster of prefabricated structures sat in a crater, half buried to shield them from the planet's unpredictable storms. The metal walls were reinforced, but I could see claw marks raked across one of them, deep enough to make me pause. This place wasn't just dangerous, it was hostile. Inside, the hum of machinery and the cool, recycled air was a welcome change from the oppressive atmosphere outside. A handful of personnel moved between stations, but the mood was tense. Harkins led me to the main briefing room where a holographic map of the surrounding terrain flickered on the central console. He motioned for me to sit while he pulled up a display of sound wave patterns and communications logs. "We've been trying to get a proper signal out for weeks," Harkins explained. "Every time we try, we attract unwanted attention. That's cost us lives already." He glanced toward the closed door, where a plaque listed the names of crew members who died since the outpost was established. "This planet amplifies sound in ways we can't fully predict. One wrong signal, and the local fauna come running." I scanned the data. The waveforms looked normal enough at first glance, but there were subtle distortions, patterns that didn't align with anything typical. "It's not just amplification," I muttered. "It's interference. The atmosphere's reacting to the frequencies in a way we didn't anticipate. These creatures are tuned into something unique." "Exactly," Harkins said, his jaw tightening. "And that's why you're here. We need a way to communicate without triggering another attack." Before I could respond, the base intercom crackled to life. "Team 1, prep for a live communication test. All personnel report to your designated stations." Harkins looked at me, his expression hard. "This is your chance to see what we're dealing with firsthand." I followed him to the control room. A team of operators sat at their stations, each one monitoring different data feeds. The tension was palpable. "Let's run the test," Harkins ordered. The technician keyed in a sequence, and a low hum reverberated through the room. The sound started low, barely audible, then rose in pitch. It seemed harmless until the ground began to shake. "Sir," one of the operators called out, panic in his voice. "We've got movement on the surface." "Damn it," Harkins swore. "Shut it down." The hum cut out, but the damage was already done. I watched the external feeds as a swarm of creatures crested the nearby ridge. They were fast, moving in coordinated waves, their sleek bodies reflecting the harsh light of Caltris's sun. Dozens of them, each one the size of a small vehicle. "Everyone, get to defense stations," Harkins barked. The base came alive with activity. Alarms blared, and personnel scrambled to man the turrets and reinforce the gates. I wasn't a soldier anymore, but instinct kicked in. I grabbed a pulse rifle from the nearest rack and took a position by one of the barricades. The creatures slammed into the perimeter fence, their claws tearing at the metal. The fence held, for now, but they were relentless. One of them let out a high-pitched screech, and several more joined in. The sound cut through the air, sharp and painful. "Open fire!" Harkins shouted. The turrets whirred to life, spitting plasma rounds into the advancing swarm. Some of the creatures fell, but more kept coming. Their screeches grew louder, and the noise seemed to reverberate through the very air. My ears were ringing from the intensity. I took aim at one of the larger creatures, firing several rounds into its torso. It staggered but didn't stop. Another screech, even louder this time, cut through the chaos, and the creatures began retreating as quickly as they'd come. "Hold fire," Harkins ordered. He stood watching as the last of the creatures disappeared over the ridge. The silence that followed was deafening. I lowered my rifle, my heart still racing. That was close. Harkins nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "This is what we're dealing with. Every time we try to send a signal, they come. We've tried different frequencies, but nothing seems to work. They're drawn to the sound." I glanced at the charred remains of the creatures that hadn't made it back. "They're not just reacting to the noise, they're communicating. That screech, it wasn't random. It was a signal." Harkins frowned. "A signal? Think about it. They're using sound to coordinate their attacks. That's why they retreat when the screech reaches a certain pitch. They're listening to each other, and we've been sending out signals that disrupt their communication." He stared at me, realization dawning. "So, you're saying we could be triggering their responses without even knowing it?" "Exactly. If we can figure out the frequencies they use, we might be able to avoid them, or even control their movements." Harkins looked at me with a mixture of hope and caution. "Do you think you can do that?" I nodded slowly. "It's going to take time, but I think so. We need to analyze their sound patterns, figure out what they're responding to. It's not just about avoiding attacks anymore. If we can understand how they communicate, we can weaponize it." Harkins didn't say anything for a moment, then finally nodded. "All right, you've got the green light, but we don't have much time. The alien coalition has been scouting this planet, and it's only a matter of time before they come for us. If we're going to survive, we need an edge." I didn't need to be reminded of the stakes. This wasn't just a scientific mission, it was survival. If we couldn't figure this out, we wouldn't last long against the creatures, let alone the alien forces watching from above. "Let's get to work," I said, already running through the calculations in my head. As I followed Harkins out of the control room, I glanced back at the monitors. The swarm had retreated, but the threat was far from over. We had triggered something on Caltris, and I had a feeling it was just the beginning. The echo of the creature's retreat still lingered when the first shouts went up. The medics rushed in, carrying a stretcher for one of the team members. The attack had ended, but the damage was done. Private Sanders lay on the stretcher, clutching his side where a deep gash ran across his torso. The medics worked quickly, applying pressure as they wheeled him toward the medical bay. His face was pale, sweat pooling at his brow. Harkins was already barking orders. "Get the tech crew on repairs, now. Those breaches need sealing before we're left open to another attack." I stood by the control panel, eyes fixed on the data feed. The logs from the communication test flashed across the screen, showing the sequence of frequencies we'd broadcast. The pattern was consistent, but something was off. The creatures had responded too quickly, as if they were waiting for the signal. Harkins moved to my side, his expression hard. "What do you make of it, Thorne?" I pulled up the sound wave chart, highlighting the key points where the interference had occurred. We transmitted on standard comm frequencies, but there was a spike here, right before the creatures showed up. I pointed to the spike. "This isn't normal. It's like the atmosphere is amplifying specific frequencies." Harkins crossed his arms, frowning. "And that's what drew them." "Maybe, but it's not just amplification." I pulled up a visual of the area surrounding the base. "Look at the terrain. It's like a natural amplifier. The ridges and rock formations create echoes that bounce sound waves across the landscape. Whatever we're transmitting is getting amplified, and the creatures are picking it up." "So, you're saying the planet itself is working against us?" he asked. I nodded. It's not just the creatures, it's the environment. The whole ecosystem is tuned to sound. Harkins cursed under his breath. How do we communicate without bringing them down on us? That's what I need to figure out. I adjusted the display, isolating the frequencies from the previous attack. I'm going to run some simulations, see if there's a pattern to their response. Do it, Harkins said, and make it quick. We can't afford another attack like this. I got to work, pulling up the recordings of the creature's sounds and cross-referencing them with the frequencies we'd used. It was a meticulous process, analyzing each wave, breaking down the spikes, and comparing them to the creature's vocal patterns. The medics' voices echoed from down the hall as they worked on Sanders, and the sound of welding filled the air as tech crews patched up the base's breaches. "Hey, Thorne," a voice called out. I turned to see Lieutenant Alvarez approaching, his face tense. "We've got damage reports from multiple sectors. The east wall took the worst of it, 3 breaches, 2 minor, 1 critical. The defenses held, but we'll be vulnerable if another wave comes before repairs are done." I nodded, keeping my focus on the screen. "Understood. We need to make sure our next transmission doesn't trigger another response. If I can isolate the frequencies they react to, we might be able to avoid it." Alvarez glanced at the screen, his eyes scanning the data. "You really think we can outsmart them?" "It's not about outsmarting them," I said. "It's about understanding their communication. If we know how they respond to sound, we can work around it, or even use it to our advantage." Alvarez grunted, unconvinced. "Well, let's hope you figure it out before we run out of options." I continued my analysis, piecing together the puzzle of Caltras's acoustic environment. The more I studied the data, the clearer it became that the creatures weren't just reacting, they were communicating. Their response times, the way they moved in coordinated patterns, the specific frequencies they used, all of it pointed to an organized behavior, not random aggression. The door to the control room hissed open, and Harkins returned, his face set in a grim line. "Sanders is stable, but he's out of commission for now. The medics say it's touch and go." I acknowledged the update with a nod. "I'm narrowing down the range. If I can pinpoint the exact frequencies they respond to, we'll have a better chance of avoiding another encounter." "Or we could use it against them," Harkins said, a hint of something darker in his voice. "If we know what frequencies they hate, we could repel them, buy ourselves some breathing room." I paused, considering his words. "Maybe, but that's a double-edged sword. If we broadcast on the wrong frequency, we might draw in more of them, or worse, we could trigger an aggressive response." "That's a risk we might have to take," Harkins replied. "We need option, Thorne. Right now, we're sitting ducks." I adjusted the parameters on the simulation, running a test with a narrower range of frequencies. The screen displayed a series of waveforms, each one corresponding to the creature's vocalizations. As the simulation played out, I noticed a pattern, a specific pitch that caused the creatures to change direction and retreat. "There," I said, pointing to the waveform. "This frequency, when we hit it, the creatures pull back. It's like a command to retreat." Harkins leaned in, studying the screen. "If we can isolate that and broadcast it selectively, we might be able to control their movements," I finished. Harkins nodded, a determined look in his eyes. "Get that frequency isolated and test it. We need to know if it's reliable." I set the simulation to isolate the frequency, extracting it from the background noise. The screen showed a clear, distinct pattern, a harmonic signature that matched the creature's response. It was our best lead yet. Alvarez, who had been watching silently, finally spoke up. "If we can use this, it could be a game changer. But how do we test it without risking another attack?" "We'll start small," I said. "We can set up a portable emitter and run the frequency in a controlled area. If we draw in a few of them, we'll know it works." Harkins nodded. "All right. Get the equipment ready. We'll move out in 1 hour." The team mobilized, gathering gear and setting up a portable sound emitter near one of the smaller entrances to the base. I monitored the setup, ensuring the frequency was isolated and ready for transmission. As we worked, the atmosphere remained tense. Every movement felt like a potential trigger. Harkins, Alvarez, and I positioned ourselves at the observation point. The emitter hummed to life, and I activated the sequence. The low-frequency sound pulsed through the air, barely audible to human ears, but strong enough to travel across the landscape. "Activating now," I said, my finger hovering over the control. The emitter sent out the signal, and we waited. At first, there was nothing. The landscape remained still, the only movement coming from the gusts of wind that kicked up dust across the rocky ground. Then, the monitors showed activity. A small cluster of creatures appeared on the radar, moving toward our position. "They're responding," I said, keeping my eyes on the screen. Harkins tensed, his hand resting on his sidearm. "Steady. Let's see how they react." The creatures moved closer, their sleek forms visible on the external feed. They advanced slowly, drawn to the source of the sound. When they reached the emitter's perimeter, they paused, as if listening. I adjusted the frequency slightly, increasing the pitch to match the retreat signal. The creatures reacted instantly, turning away and retreating back toward the ridges. "It works," I said, exhaling. "We found the frequency." Harkins nodded, but his expression remained guarded. "It's a start, but we need to refine it further. If we can control their behavior, we might have a chance of surviving long enough to establish a proper communication system." Alvarez grinned, the first hint of optimism I'd seen since we arrived. "If we can keep them at bay, it'll buy us the time we need." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Harkins said. "This is just one test. We need more data before we can count on it." I agreed. "We need to study their vocal patterns further. If we can decode their full range of communication, we might be able to understand their social structure and anticipate their behavior." "Then that's our next step," Harkins replied. "Gather the data, run more tests. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." As we packed up the equipment and headed back to the base, I felt a sense of urgency. We had made progress, but the threat remained. Caltris was a death world for a reason, and its ecosystem was far more complex than we had anticipated. If we were going to survive, we'd need to understand not just how to communicate, but how to coexist with the deadly environment around us. We weren't just dealing with a hostile species, we were dealing with a planet that used sound as its weapon. And if we could master it, we might just have a chance. The day after our first successful test, the atmosphere in the base was tense. We had confirmed that the creatures responded to specific frequencies, but now came the harder part, understanding why and how to use it without drawing more trouble. The medics reported that Sanders was stable, but would be bedridden for at least a week. We couldn't afford another attack, not while we were down a team member. The morning briefing was terse. Harkins stood at the front, arms crossed. "All right, team. We've confirmed that sound frequencies can influence the local fauna. Thorne, you're leading the next phase. We need more data, and we need to know how far we can push this without causing another swarm." I nodded. "I've set up a small testing area near the ridge, far enough from the base to minimize risk, but close enough for quick support if needed. We'll start with low-intensity pulses and work our way up." Alvarez and a few others prepared the equipment. There were murmurs among the team, some skeptical of the approach. Ever since the attack, there had been debates over our next move. Half the team wanted to weaponize the frequencies immediately, thinking it could provide a defensive advantage. The other half, myself included, were more cautious. Caltris was too unpredictable, and one wrong step could turn our defensive tools into beacons for another onslaught. I watched as Alvarez adjusted the emitter, his hand steady but his face serious. "You know some of the others think this is a waste of time, right?" he said, not looking up from his work. "They don't understand," I replied. "We're dealing with a system here, not just a single species. If we use the wrong frequency or amplify it too much, we could upset the balance." He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "I get that, but we might not have time for balance. We need a way to fight back. True, I admitted, but if we're smart, we won't have to fight at all. The goal here is to figure out how to coexist, not escalate. As the test site came online, I activated the first pulse, a low-frequency signal designed to be non-threatening. The area around the ridge was quiet, save for the wind rustling through the tall, brittle vegetation. I kept my eyes on the monitors, tracking the movement of any nearby creatures. "There's movement," Alvarez noted, pointing to a blip on the screen. A single creature emerged from the rocks, its sleek body gliding silently across the terrain. It paused at the edge of the test site, twitching as it seemed to analyze the sound. I adjusted the frequency, lowering it even further. The creature hesitated, then moved away, retreating into the shadows. "Good," I said, jotting down notes. "Low frequency seems to have a calming effect. We'll try the next set." Over the next few hours, we ran multiple tests, each time adjusting the signal's frequency and intensity. We observed varying reactions. Some creatures backed off, others seemed unaffected, and a few even became agitated. During one test, a small pack approached, their movements cautious. I switched the signal to a higher pitch. They stopped, shifting uneasily. One of them bared its fangs but didn't advance. I reduced the pitch again, and the group slowly backed away, disappearing into the ridge's shadows. "Looks like we're getting somewhere," Alvarez said, sounding more optimistic. "Yeah," I replied, feeling a cautious hope. "If we can keep refining this, we might have a non-lethal way to keep them at bay." As the day wore on, we gathered more data, carefully cataloging each reaction. But tension simmered beneath the surface. During a break, Harkins pulled me aside. "Thorne, we need to decide where we stand on this," he said, his tone low. "The team is getting divided. Some of them want to ramp up the tests, see if we can use the frequencies offensively." I frowned. "Weaponizing this is risky, Harkins. We still don't fully understand how they're communicating. If we trigger a larger response—" "I get it," he interrupted. "But there's pressure. People are scared after Sanders. They want assurance that we can defend ourselves." I took a breath, knowing he was right. "Look, I'm not against using the frequencies as a deterrent, but we need to be careful. I'll continue the experiments, but we need to avoid going too far too fast." "Fair enough," he replied, though I could see the doubt in his eyes. "Just make sure you've got something concrete soon. Morale's fragile, and if we get another hit like the last one, we might not bounce back." Back at the testing site, I resumed the experiments, this time focusing on refining the low-frequency signals that had shown success in repelling the creatures. Alvarez assisted me, his attention sharp as we recorded the data. But as the day came to a close, one test caught us off guard. I activated the frequency, expecting the usual response. But instead of retreating, the creatures paused, then let out a low, rumbling call that reverberated through the air. "What's happening?" Alvarez asked, tension in his voice. I checked the readings. "They're signaling each other. This frequency, it's like a warning call." A larger group emerged from the rocks, moving quickly. I adjusted the signal, trying to find the right frequency to make them back off. But they kept coming, their movements coordinated. "Fall back," I shouted, grabbing the portable emitter. Alvarez and I retreated toward the base, the creatures following at a distance, their eyes glowing in the fading light. We reached the entrance, sealing it behind us just as the creatures approached. They circled outside, but the emitter's high-frequency pulse finally made them retreat. Inside, the team gathered around, the tension palpable. Harkins approached, his expression grim. "What happened out there?" I held up the emitter. "We triggered a response, an organized one. They're not just reacting, they're communicating with each other." "So what does that mean?" Alvarez asked. "It means this planet's ecosystem is more complex than we thought," I replied. "And if we're not careful, we might be provoking something far bigger." Harkins ran a hand through his hair. "We need to figure this out, fast. Double the experiments, and let's start preparing defensive measures." As the team dispersed, I reviewed the data, my mind racing. We had made progress, but it felt like we were barely scratching the surface. Caltrus was revealing its secrets, but every answer only led to more questions. If we were going to survive here, we needed to decode the language of this world, and quickly. One wrong move, and we'd be facing more than just an aggressive swarm. We'd be dealing with an organized response from a planet that didn't want us here. The lab hummed with the low-frequency pulse of the emitter, a steady rhythm that had become the backdrop of our daily life on Caltrus. For days, we had been methodically testing the sound frequencies, and my hope for a breakthrough had grown. However, that hope was shattered with the sudden arrival of an alarming notification on my terminal. "Marcus, get over here," Alvarez shouted, his voice tinged with urgency. I rushed to his side, where he was peering intently at his screen. "What is it?" I asked, dread curling in my stomach as I approached. "An unidentified signal just came through the long-range scanners," he said, fingers dancing over the keyboard. "It's been repeating every few seconds. I've never seen anything like it." I felt a chill run down my spine as I leaned closer to the screen. The waveform was complex, almost chaotic, a stark contrast to the simple patterns we had been experimenting with. "What does it mean?" "Hard to say, but it's definitely artificial. A probe, maybe." Alvarez's brow furrowed. "The signal originated from deep space, and it seems to be sweeping over our location." The implications hit me like a punch. "Are we being scanned?" Before Alvarez could respond, Harkins strode into the lab, his expression serious. "What's going on?" "Unidentified signal," I replied, gesturing to the screen. "It's a probe scanning our position." Harkins stepped closer, scrutinizing the data. "How long until we know more?" "Not long," Alvarez said. "If it's a probe, it might have already sent our location back to whoever launched it. We need to act fast." "What if it's not just a probe?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What if it's a reconnaissance mission for an alien coalition? We could be looking at an invasion." "Then we need to prepare," Harkins said, steeling himself. "We can't risk getting caught off guard again. I want everyone on high alert, and we need to discuss our next steps. Marcus, I want you to lead the charge on this." "Me?" I exclaimed, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle on my shoulders. "I'm just a xenolinguist. My focus is on communication, not combat strategies." Harkins met my gaze firmly. "And that's exactly why we need you. You understand how these aliens think. You might be our best chance of negotiating if it comes to that. Or it could put us all in danger if they view us as a threat," I replied, uncertainty creeping in. "We need to be cautious." "Caution hasn't helped us so far," Harkins countered. "We need a defensive plan, and I think it's time we weaponized what we've discovered with sound. If we can deter whatever is coming our way, we should use it." Alvarez's expression mirrored my concern. "But Marcus is right. We don't fully understand the implications of what we're dealing with. If we escalate, we might provoke them into an attack." The tension in the room was palpable. I could see Harkins wavering, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. "We can't afford to wait for them to make the first move. We need options on the table. Marcus, what can you give us?" Taking a deep breath, I felt the conflict inside me grow. The urge to push for peaceful communication was at odds with the looming threat that now hung over us. "We can continue refining the frequencies. I can work on developing a sound-based defense system that creates a barrier against intruders. But it's not going to be easy." "Then we'll do it," Harkins said, resolve returning to his voice. "Everyone, gear up. We'll conduct drills and set up the sound emitters around the perimeter. Marcus, I want your research on sound frequencies to be our top priority." I nodded, even as a knot twisted in my stomach. It felt wrong to move forward with a weaponized approach, but the urgency of the situation left little room for hesitation. I turned back to my terminal, the alien probe still sending signals from the depths of space, as if mocking our predicament. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. I worked alongside Alvarez and a few other team members to recalibrate the emitters, pushing them to their limits. We experimented with combinations of frequencies, testing how to create sonic barriers that could deter unwanted visitors. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the base, I felt the tension rise with the darkness. I could hear the distant hum of generators and the muted conversations of the team, their voices a mixture of determination and fear. "Do you think they're coming for us?" Alvarez asked, his voice low as we finalized the last adjustments. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I have a feeling we won't be waiting long to find out." Suddenly, the comm system crackled to life, Harkin's voice echoing through the base. "All personnel, prepare for incoming contact. We've detected movement on the scanners. It's large, and it's heading our way. I want everyone at their stations, now." My heart raced as I dashed to the control room, the atmosphere charged with adrenaline. The main screen flickered to life, displaying a mass of incoming signals that filled the monitor with chaotic spikes. "Get me a visual," Harkins barked, urgency in his tone. Alvarez pulled up the feed, and our collective breath caught as the image came into focus. A colossal ship, unlike anything we had ever seen, cruised through the atmosphere, its sleek form cutting through the clouds like a knife. It was enormous, dwarfing our outpost, and the reality of our isolation sank in. "Contact the coalition," I shouted, panic edging my voice. "They need to know we're here and that we're not hostile." "It might be too late for that," Harkins replied, his face grim. "We don't even know if they can understand us." The ship shifted, changing its trajectory to hover ominously above us. I felt an icy dread wash over me. We were caught in their sights, and there was nowhere to run. "Activate the sonic emitters," Harkins ordered. "Let's see if our defenses hold." I rushed back to the controls, fingers flying over the keys. The emitters sprang to life, sending out low-frequency pulses that filled the air. I focused on the readings, hoping for a sign of success. "Are they responding?" Harkins demanded. "Not yet," I said, my heart pounding. "But if they're scanning us, we'll know soon." Just then, a blaring alarm echoed through the base, the lights flashing red as warning sirens blared. The probe had detected our defenses. "They're not responding to the frequencies. They're moving in." "Stand by for contact," Harkins yelled. "Prepare for the worst." My mind raced with possibilities, but amidst the chaos, I clung to one thought. We needed to communicate. We needed to show them we were not their enemy. As the ship loomed closer, I realized that the fate of our mission and our lives rested on our ability to navigate this uncharted territory. I had to find a way to reach out, to make them see us as more than just intruders on their world. The tension was unbearable, each passing second stretching into eternity. Would our sound technology be enough to shield us from the unknown? Or had we unknowingly provoked a greater threat? As the shadows of the alien ship swallowed the base, I braced myself for the confrontation ahead, knowing that this was only the beginning. The night wore on, each tick of the clock echoing my growing unease. As the alien ship loomed above our outpost, the adrenaline of the earlier moments faded, replaced by a heavy sense of impending conflict. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were teetering on the brink of something monumental, and every decision carried weight. "Marcus," Alvarez burst into the lab, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. "We need to finalize the defense system. Harkins wants to test it before whatever is up there decides to make contact." I nodded, pushing aside the doubts that gnawed at me. "I'm almost there with the calculations. I believe we can use the low-frequency emitter to create a disruption field around the perimeter." "Great, but we need to do it fast," Alvarez urged, his eyes darting nervously. "If we can repel the creature swarms we've seen, we might buy ourselves enough time to figure out what that ship wants." I couldn't deny that we were running out of options. I gathered my notes, recalibrating the parameters of the sound waves we had been working on. My mind was a flurry of calculations and theories, each one drawing me closer to the uncomfortable realization that I was about to weaponize my research. The team gathered in the main control room, tension palpable as we prepared for the test. Harkins stood at the front, a resolute expression on his face, eyes scanning the faces of his team. "Listen up," he said, commanding everyone's attention. "What we're about to do is uncharted territory. We're using Marcus's research as a defensive measure, and we need to be ready for anything. This could either save us or escalate the situation." I felt the weight of his words pressing down on me. Could we truly safeguard ourselves without provoking the alien forces? "Let's get this done," Harkins continued. "Marcus, give us the rundown." I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll activate the emitter at low frequency first. It's designed to create a sound barrier that should repel any aggressive fauna approaching the perimeter. If it works, we can tweak the parameters for greater effectiveness." "Just to be clear, this is a temporary fix," Alvarez added. "It'll buy us some time, but we need to remain vigilant. We don't know what else could come our way." "Understood," Harkins replied, turning his attention to the team. "Let's get to our positions. Alvarez, you're with Marcus on the control panel. Everyone else, take your posts around the perimeter. Stay alert." As we moved into action, I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline surging through me. I watched as the team dispersed, each member taking their stations with a mix of determination and trepidation. I knew that the success of this test could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. "Let's hope we're ready for this," I muttered to Alvarez as we made our way to the controls. "Ready or not, we need to act," he replied. "You've got this, Marcus." The countdown began, and my heart raced as I focused on the emitter's controls. I initiated the activation sequence, and the room filled with a low, vibrating hum. I watched the readouts, ensuring everything was in the green. "Sound waves are stable," I confirmed, glancing at the screen. "We're ready." Alvarez nodded. "Activate the emitter on my mark. 3, 2, 1, now." With a decisive keystroke, I sent the command through. The emitter roared to life, sending out a wave of low-frequency sound that rippled through the air. I could feel the vibrations beneath my feet as the sound barrier expanded outward from our position. "Monitoring response," Alvarez said, eyes glued to the screen. It wasn't long before the first signs of movement appeared on the monitors. A swarm of creatures, drawn by the emitted sound, surged towards our location. I held my breath as I watched the screen, my heart racing. The creatures were massive, their bodies sleek and muscular, covered in thick armor. As they approached the sound barrier, I noticed a shift in their behavior. They hesitated, faltering in their advance as the sound waves washed over them. "It's working," I exclaimed, a surge of relief flooding me. Alvarez leaned closer, his eyes wide. "Look at their response." The creatures began to veer off, the sound waves disorienting them. They twisted and turned, unable to navigate through the invisible wall of sound we had created. The success of our test was immediate and overwhelming. Cheers erupted from the team as the creatures retreated, vanishing into the shadows of the surrounding wilderness. Harkins approached, a triumphant grin on his face. "We did it. This is a huge step forward. If we can repel them, we can protect ourselves from whatever that ship has in store for us." "Wait," I said, my voice rising above the commotion. "This is just a temporary solution. We can't let this go to our heads. There are serious implications for weaponizing sound technology." "We need to think bigger," Harkins replied, his excitement unabated. "This is proof of concept. We can refine it, make it more potent, and use it as a defense mechanism. Or it could become a weapon we can't control," I warned, my heart sinking at the prospect. "What if we end up inciting a conflict we're not prepared for?" "Marcus, we're already on the brink of conflict," Alvarez interjected. "This is our chance to defend ourselves. We can't afford to hesitate." The tension was palpable as the team deliberated. I felt the pressure mounting, torn between the urge to advocate for a peaceful approach and the reality of the threat we faced. "Let's celebrate this victory for now," Harkins said, cutting through the uncertainty. "We'll regroup in the morning and discuss our next steps." For now, enjoy the success." As the team dispersed, I remained rooted in place, watching as they celebrated. The success felt hollow, overshadowed by the knowledge that we were moving dangerously close to weaponization. That night, sleep eluded me as I wrestled with my thoughts. I paced the lab, poring over the data from the day's test. The sound waves, while effective, were a tool I had never intended to turn into a weapon. With every passing hour, my resolve to find a peaceful solution dwindled. If we continued down this path, what kind of world would we create? The following morning brought no clarity. The base buzzed with renewed energy, the atmosphere charged with optimism. Harkins called for a briefing, and I joined the team, bracing myself for the discussions to come. "Listen up, everyone," Harkins said, standing at the front of the room. "Last night's test was a success, but it's only the beginning. Marcus will lead us in refining the sound technology, and I want to explore every avenue to enhance our defenses." I exchanged worried glances with Alvarez. "What about our approach to the aliens?" I asked, hoping to redirect the conversation. Harkins waved a hand dismissively. "We'll get to that, but right now, we need to focus on protecting ourselves. We can't negotiate if we're dead." Frustration bubbled within me. But we're not just fighting creatures, we have a potential alien coalition hovering over us. What if they come here for more than just observation? Harkins's gaze hardened. "Then we'll be ready. We can't afford to wait for them to make the first move." As discussions continued, I felt increasingly isolated in my beliefs. The team rallied around Harkins, eager to press forward with the weaponization of sound technology. I struggled to voice my concerns as they debated strategies for refining our defenses. "Let's focus on integrating multiple frequencies," Alvarez suggested. "If we can create a spectrum of sound waves, we might be able to deter a wider range of threats." "Good idea," Harkins agreed. "We need to create a sonic barrier that adapts to incoming threats." I watched, torn between the excitement of scientific discovery and the dread of what we were about to unleash. The discussions continued, the team brainstorming ways to enhance the emitter and create a more formidable defense. Eventually, I raised my hand, needing to voice my dissent once more. What if we could also communicate with the aliens? There might be a chance to reach out before we escalate things further. "Right now, we need to prioritize our safety," Harkins replied, crossing his arms. "We'll consider your ideas later, Marcus. For now, let's focus on perfecting the defense system." As the meeting wrapped up, I felt a sense of dread settle over me. We were barreling toward a future I could no longer support. The impending alien contact weighed heavily on my mind, and the thought of using our sound technology as a weapon was a burden I didn't want to bear. Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly to enhance the sound emitters. I found myself buried in calculations and testing protocols, determined to create a robust defense while trying to appease the team's push for weaponization. But as each day passed, I could feel the internal conflict escalating within me. During one testing session, we pushed the limits of the emitter, layering frequencies to create a more complex sound barrier. The success of the experiment felt exhilarating, yet the echoes of our achievement rang hollow in my ears. "Success!" Alvarez exclaimed as the creatures retreated once again. "This is incredible." "Yeah, but at what cost?" I murmured, barely audible. "What do you mean?" he asked, confusion crossing his face. "We're on the verge of creating a weapon," I replied, looking at him earnestly. "What happens when we face the aliens? What if they see us as hostile?" Alvarez's expression hardened. "And what if they don't? What if they're here to conquer us? We can't take that chance, Marcus." The pressure was mounting, and I felt the weight of my choices bearing down on me. The team rallied around the prospect of success, eager to prove the efficacy of our technology. I couldn't help but feel like a lone voice in a chorus of war drums. As the final day of testing approached, Harkins called for another meeting to discuss our next steps. I entered the room with a heavy heart, knowing that the moment of decision was looming. "Team, we're nearing the end of our tests, and I think we've proven that we can repel threats," Harkins began, his enthusiasm palpable. It's time to consider the next phase, implementation of the sonic defense system around the perimeter. I steeled myself, ready to voice my concerns once more. What about communication? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We could reach out to the aliens and assess their intentions. We need to understand what we're dealing with. Harkins narrowed his eyes. We don't have time for that, Marcus. We have a potential threat above us, and we need to prepare for combat. You've seen how quickly things can escalate here. But, no buts, Harkins interrupted, raising his hand. We've given you the time to explore peaceful options, but it's clear we need to prioritize our safety. If we don't act now, we risk everything. I felt my heart sink, a wave of frustration washing over me. You're pushing us toward a conflict we don't even fully understand. We could be inviting destruction upon ourselves. Enough, Harkins said, his voice firm. The decision has been made. We will weaponize the technology. The finality in his tone left no room for argument. The atmosphere in the outpost shifted palpably as the first light of dawn broke. The team buzzed with anxious energy, the previous day's discussions lingering in the air like a storm cloud. I stood by the observation window, peering at the heavens, where dark shapes began to emerge against the backdrop of stars. Marcus, Alvarez's voice cut through my thoughts, urgency in his tone. You need to see this. I turned to the control console, heart racing as I scanned the screens. There, hovering ominously in orbit, were 3 massive alien ships, their designs sleek and foreboding. They glinted in the light, unlike anything we'd seen before. The room fell silent as the reality sank in. We had no idea what these beings wanted or how they would respond to our presence. My mind raced, recalling every moment of our experiments, the data on sound frequencies, and the rapidly escalating tension within our own ranks. Status report, Harkins barked, striding into the room. Multiple alien vessels detected, Alvarez responded, his voice shaking slightly. They've established orbit over the outpost. No immediate threats, but they're armed. Harkins's expression hardened, the gravity of the situation dawning on him. We need to go on high alert. Prepare the sound emitters. If they make a move, we need to be ready to defend ourselves. Do we really want to provoke them? I interjected, my voice rising above the murmurs of the team. We don't know their intentions. And that's precisely why we need a defense, Harkins shot back, his eyes locked onto mine. The last thing we need is to be caught off guard. We're in a hostile environment, and these ships aren't here for a friendly chat. As the team began fortifying the perimeter, I felt a growing sense of dread. Our preparations felt more like a countdown to disaster than a safeguard against potential threats. I glanced at the monitors again, studying the alien ships hovering like dark omens. Minutes later, our tension peaked as one of the smaller ships detached from the fleet, descending toward the planet's surface. The team watched, holding their breath as it approached the outpost. Brace for impact, Harkins ordered, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. The ship landed with a thud, a plume of dust rising around it. My heart raced as I anticipated what would emerge. Would they be like the creatures we had fought off, or something entirely different? Ready the sound emitters, Harkins instructed, his gaze fixed on the landing site. We'll use them to disorient any potential threats. Marcus, what if we could use the same frequencies to disrupt their technology? Alvarez suggested, his eyes lighting up with possibility. The thought struck me like lightning. That might work. If we can find a frequency that affects their systems, we could potentially weaken their defenses before they even make contact. Exactly. Let's do it, Alvarez urged, the tension shifting to a shared sense of urgency. As the minutes ticked by, the anticipation built. The landing ramp of the alien vessel lowered slowly, revealing shadows that emerged. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I scrambled to finalize the calculations for the sound emitter, the urgency of the moment propelling me forward. Marcus, we're ready to test the frequencies, Alvarez said, his fingers hovering over the controls. Hold on, I said, focusing on the screen displaying the alien signatures. We need to identify their technology first. If we target the wrong thing, it could backfire. Harkins watched, his expression taut. We don't have time for a full analysis. We need to act now, before they have a chance to regroup. Fine, but let's do this smartly, I replied, trying to calm my racing heart. Let's start with a low frequency to see how they respond. If it disrupts their systems, we'll adjust accordingly. With a nod from Harkins, I initiated the sequence. A low hum filled the control room, the sound waves pulsing outward. I focused on the monitor, watching for any signs of disturbance from the aliens. At first, nothing happened. The figures remained steady as they descended from the ship, their movements deliberate and measured. I could see their forms clearly now, tall, slender, and adorned with intricate armor that glinted in the dim light. Can you increase the output? Harkins urged, his eyes darting between the screen and the landing site. I hesitated, aware of the risks involved, but the weight of our circumstances loomed heavily over us. I adjusted the controls, amplifying the sound waves. The low-frequency hum shifted, oscillating to a point where it resonated in the air around us. Almost instantly, I noticed a change. The alien figures paused, their movements faltering as the sound waves washed over them. I held my breath, heart pounding as I watched for any sign of panic or aggression. "What's happening?" Harkins demanded, leaning closer to the monitor. "It's working," I replied, a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration flooding my senses. "They're reacting to the frequency. We might be able to disrupt their technology." The aliens huddled together, clearly confused, their voices a series of clicks and whistles that echoed faintly through the air. I couldn't understand their language, but their body language spoke volumes: hesitation, uncertainty, and a hint of fear. "Keep pushing the frequency," Alvarez urged, excitement bubbling beneath his cautious demeanor. "Let's see how they respond." I increased the output again, the sound waves intensifying, filling the air with a low rumble that seemed to shake the ground beneath us. The aliens staggered back, their forms flickering in the dim light. "Something's happening," Alvarez exclaimed, eyes wide. The aliens began to retreat, huddling closer to their ship as if searching for cover. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. The very technology I had been researching for peaceful communication was now our only means of defense. "Should we prepare for an offensive?" Harkins asked, his excitement barely contained. "If we can disrupt their systems, we might have the upper hand." "Wait," I cautioned, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon me. "We need to understand their intentions first. This could escalate things in ways we're not prepared for." But Harkins was already focused on the monitors, his determination unwavering. "If they mean us harm, we need to be ready. We can't afford to wait for them to attack." The tension in the room was palpable as we all watched the scene unfold outside. The aliens appeared disoriented, their technology flickering as the sound waves continued to resonate. "Let's send a visual signal," I suggested, scrambling to gather my thoughts. "We can attempt to communicate while we still have the advantage." "Make it quick," Harkins said, his eyes trained on the monitor. I input a sequence into the console, sending out a series of flashing lights designed to indicate peace. "This should help convey our intentions," I said, my heart racing as I pressed the button. As the lights flickered, I focused on the aliens, desperate to gauge their response. For a moment, it felt as if time stood still. The aliens hesitated, their confusion palpable as they processed our actions. "Do you think they'll understand?" Alvarez asked, his voice low. I could only hope. The moments stretched out, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, one of the aliens stepped forward, raising its hands in a gesture of peace. "Stand by," Harkins ordered, tension thrumming through the air. With cautious anticipation, I continued to monitor the alien ship. They began to communicate amongst themselves, voices rising and falling in a series of clicks and whistles. "Whatever you do, don't let your guard down," Harkins cautioned, eyes narrowing. "We don't know what they're capable of." Just then, an explosion of sound erupted from the alien ship. The atmosphere crackled with energy as the aliens sent out a series of pulses, an attempt to counter our sound waves. I felt the vibrations resonate through the control room, a stark reminder that we were in a precarious situation. "Counter their signals," Harkins shouted, urgency cutting through his voice. "We need to stay on the offensive." I frantically adjusted the frequency, struggling to keep pace with the alien responses. The sound waves swirled around us, an unseen battlefield emerging in the air as we fought to establish our dominance. "This is chaos," I exclaimed, my fingers flying over the controls. "We need to regain control." As I intensified our emissions, I felt a swell of determination rise within me. We had come too far to let our research become a mere weapon. There had to be a way to bridge the gap between us and these aliens, to forge a path toward understanding. "Marcus, focus," Alvarez urged, his voice cutting through my thoughts. "They're regrouping. We need to hit them hard before they can counter us." I nodded, suppressing the doubts that threatened to derail my resolve. With a surge of clarity, I intensified the output, pushing the boundaries of our technology to its limits. The sound waves pulsed, reverberating through the air as we fought against the alien frequencies. "Look!" Alvarez shouted, pointing at the monitor. "They're destabilizing." As I watched, the aliens faltered, their technology sputtering as the sound waves enveloped them. I felt a rush of hope, but it was quickly followed by the chilling realization that this was only the beginning. The stakes had escalated, and we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. In that moment, I knew that the choices we made now would ripple through the universe, shaping the future of our world and theirs. "Prepare for contact," Harkins ordered, determination blazing in his eyes. "We're going to show them we're not to be trifled with." I hesitated, aware that we were barreling toward conflict. But as the sound waves pulsed, I also felt the undeniable pull of destiny. Our worlds were about to collide, and in the heart of the chaos, I knew that the choices I made next could either lead us to ruin or to the possibility of something greater. The tension in the control room was electric as we prepared for the first real test of our sound weapon against the alien coalition. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on my shoulders, the fate of our team resting on my decisions. The alien ship loomed outside, dark and foreboding, while our hearts raced in sync with the pulsating hum of our sound emitters. "Marcus," Harkins said, his voice steady but intense. "We need to do this now. They're regrouping, and we have a small window before they recover." I nodded, swallowing hard as I faced the control panel. The atmosphere felt charged with anxiety, every eye on me as I finalized the frequency settings. The plan was risky. We would target the aliens' technology directly, using the same sound frequencies we'd previously tested on local fauna. The potential for success was palpable, but so were the consequences. "Alvarez, ready the output," I instructed, my fingers hovering over the controls. "Once we activate the emitter, I want full power on my mark." "Understood," Alvarez replied, his expression tense. Harkins turned to the team, urgency flickering in his eyes. "Everyone, stay sharp. We're entering unknown territory here. If this doesn't work, we need to be prepared for whatever comes next." With a final glance at the monitor, I felt a surge of adrenaline. The aliens were moving again, the figures shifting on the screen as they activated their systems. I could see the shimmering energy of their technology, powerful, intricate, and entirely foreign to us. "On my count," I said, my heart racing. 3, 2, 1, activate." As I pressed the button, a low rumble filled the air, building to a resonant hum that echoed through the control room. The sound waves surged outward, enveloping the alien ship in a cocoon of vibration. For a moment, everything felt suspended in time as the frequencies clashed against the alien technology. "Look!" Alvarez shouted, pointing at the monitor. The display flickered as the aliens reacted to our assault. Their equipment sputtered, a series of alarms sounding from their vessel as the sound waves pulsed against them. My heart raced as I watched their systems destabilize, the once menacing presence of the alien coalition starting to waver. "Keep pushing," Harkins commanded, excitement flickering in his eyes. I intensified the output, the sound waves reverberating through the air as we fought against the alien frequencies. The aliens' figures began to stagger, confusion and alarm evident in their movements. "It's working," I exclaimed, a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration flooding my senses. But just as I allowed myself to feel a spark of hope, a low growl resonated from outside the outpost. I froze, glancing at the observation window just in time to see a shadowy figure break through the tree line. The loud sound waves had awakened the local fauna, a swarm of aggressive creatures charging toward us, drawn by the cacophony. "No!" I shouted, the horror washing over me. "We've got to shut it down." "Too late!" Harkins yelled, eyes wide with panic. "We can't disengage while they're still disoriented. We have to hold the line." The ground trembled as the creatures barreled toward the outpost, their screeches cutting through the air like knives. I felt a wave of dread wash over me as I realized the consequences of our actions. Our defense had turned into a beacon, summoning the very beasts we had hoped to deter. "Get the weapons ready," Harkins barked, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We have to defend the outpost." I scrambled to adjust the sound emitter, desperate to create a counter-frequency that might repel the creatures. But as I glanced at the monitor, my stomach sank. The aliens were regrouping too, their ship recovering from the effects of our sound waves. "Marcus," Alvarez called, his voice shaking with urgency. "They're countering. We need to stay focused." "Right," I shouted, forcing myself to stay in the moment. "Let's create a frequency to drive the creatures back first. Then we'll deal with the aliens." With frantic precision, I adjusted the controls again, pushing the sound waves to a higher frequency. The vibrations intensified, and I felt the pressure of the moment bearing down on me. Outside, the chaos erupted. Creatures poured from the trees, their eyes glowing with rage as they charged toward the outpost, shrieking in fury. I could hear their claws scraping against the metal walls, the sounds reverberating in my bones. "Get ready," Harkins shouted, rallying the team. "We'll have to fight them off until we can regain control." As I activated the newly configured sound waves, a blast of energy surged into the air, pulsing outward in a desperate attempt to drive the creatures back. The waves hit the swarm like a tidal wave, momentarily staggering them. "Push them back," Alvarez shouted, his voice strained with effort. The creatures hesitated, their momentum faltering as the sound waves washed over them. It was enough for us to gain some ground, and I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. But just as quickly as the hope emerged, it was extinguished. The aliens were regaining their footing, their technology stabilizing as they prepared to retaliate. "Marcus," Harkins yelled, urgency threading his voice. "We need to make a choice. Do we continue pushing back the creatures or focus on the aliens?" I weighed the options, adrenaline surging through my veins. "We can't let the aliens regroup. If we lose control, we could lose everything." "Then let's take the fight to them," Harkins insisted, determination blazing in his eyes. "We have to show them we're not going down without a fight." I nodded, shifting the sound waves again, targeting the alien ship directly. The frequency pulsed with a raw energy, sending shockwaves through the air. As I unleashed the sound waves, a sense of exhilaration flooded through me. The alien ship flickered, their technology sputtering as we pressed our advantage. But the creatures were not done yet. They surged forward again, pushing against the sound waves, clawing at the outpost. "Hold the line," Harkins shouted, his voice ringing with authority. As I monitored the screens, I could see the alien ship straining under our assault. But my focus was divided, torn between the immediate threat of the creatures and the looming danger of the aliens. "Prepare for close combat," Harkins ordered, signaling to the team. We grabbed our weapons, adrenaline fueling our resolve as we moved to defend our outpost. The door to the control room flew open, and the first creatures barreled inside, eyes wild with fury. I raised my weapon, the sound waves still pulsing behind me, creating a barrier that pushed back against the incoming tide. "Fire!" Harkins shouted, and we unleashed a volley of shots into the horde. The creatures screeched, their bodies writhing as the shots hit home. But they kept coming, relentless in their assault. "More are coming," Alvarez shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Shift the frequency again," Harkins urged, determination etched on his face. "We need to push them back before they overwhelm us." I struggled to maintain control over the sound waves while firing at the advancing creatures. The dual assault felt overwhelming, but I forced myself to focus. With each pulse of the sound waves, I could feel the creatures being pushed back, their charge faltering against the wall of sound. But I could also see the aliens recovering outside, their technology stabilizing and preparing for an attack of their own. "Marcus," Alvarez shouted, desperation flooding his voice. "We need to make a choice now. We can't keep splitting our focus." I took a deep breath, weighing the options before me. "Fine. Let's deal with the creatures first. Then we'll turn our attention back to the aliens. We can't afford to let them breach our defenses." With renewed determination, I adjusted the frequencies again, pushing the sound waves to their maximum output. The roar of sound filled the room, drowning out everything else as the waves crashed against the advancing swarm. The creatures shrieked, their bodies buckling under the intensity of the sound. I could see them faltering, hesitating as the sound waves surged around them. "Keep firing," Harkins shouted, a fierce determination in his eyes. We unleashed another volley into the horde, and for a moment it felt like we were gaining the upper hand. But then, just as quickly, I noticed the alien ship shifting, lights flickering as they prepared to retaliate. "Not now," I whispered under my breath, feeling the weight of our situation bearing down on me. The aliens fired back, energy beams surging toward the outpost. The ground shook as the blast hit the walls, sending debris flying. "Marcus, we need to regroup," Alvarez yelled, fear lacing his voice. "We can't let them take us down," I shouted back, forcing myself to focus on the monitors. Just then, a wave of sound erupted from the alien ship, crashing against our defenses. I felt the force of it reverberate through the control room, threatening to destabilize everything we had fought for. "Hold on," Harkins shouted, bracing himself against the console. "We're not done yet." As I struggled to maintain control over the sound waves, I realized the battle was far from over. The choice I had made was reverberating through our defenses, each moment escalating the stakes higher than I had anticipated. The chaos swirled around us, but in the heart of the storm, I knew one thing for certain: we had to push through. For our survival. For the fate of Caltris. With every ounce of strength, I shifted the frequencies again, unleashing a final surge of sound waves to repel both the creatures and the alien coalition. The aftermath of the battle was a haunting silence, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded just hours before. The air in the outpost felt heavy, thick with unspoken fears and regrets. I stared out of the observation window, my mind racing as I processed what had just happened. The landscape of Caltris lay before me, scarred by our desperate defense. Fragments of creatures littered the ground, a grim testament to the violence we had unleashed. The knowledge that we had won didn't bring relief, it only deepened my unease. The cost of victory weighed heavily on my conscience. I turned back to the control room, where the rest of the team gathered. The faces that met me were grim, reflecting the toll of the day. Some were nursing wounds, while others stared blankly, haunted by the loss of our fallen comrades. "Marcus," Harkins said, his voice low and steady, "we need to talk about what happened out there." "I know," I replied, running a hand through my hair. "But can we really continue this? We pushed them back. But at what cost?" "What are you suggesting?" Harkins asked, his eyes narrowing. "That we abandon our only hope of defending ourselves." "No," I said, frustration rising within me. "I'm saying we need to consider the ethics of what we're doing. Using sound as a weapon, it's dangerous. We might be inviting more chaos than we can handle." Harkins shook his head. "We don't have that luxury. The aliens will be back. We need to refine our weapon before they strike again. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. But what if we're just creating more problems? The local fauna is reacting violently to our technology. How many more lives are we willing to sacrifice? A tense silence fell over the room. I could see the weight of my words hanging in the air, each person wrestling with the moral implications of our situation. "We can't afford to think about that now," Alvarez chimed in, his voice shaky. "We need to focus on survival." "Survival shouldn't come at the expense of our humanity," I argued, my voice rising. "We're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting for the right to exist without becoming monsters ourselves." "Enough," Harkins snapped, his patience wearing thin. "We have a military leader breathing down our necks, demanding results. If we don't deliver, we risk everything, our mission, our lives. We're out here on a death world. Marcus, you think they care about our ethics?" The room fell silent again, the weight of his words settling over us like a shroud. I clenched my fists, torn between my ideals and the harsh reality we faced. "Look," Harkins continued, his tone softening, "we can't just abandon this. We owe it to those we lost to see this through. If we can perfect this technology, we might stand a chance against the aliens. We might save lives." My heart ached at the thought of our fallen comrades, those who had fought bravely alongside us. But at what point did survival become a justification for becoming the very thing we feared? "Let's just take a step back," I suggested, desperate for some clarity. "We can reevaluate our approach. Maybe there's a way to use the sound technology without it becoming a weapon." "And how do you propose we do that?" Harkins challenged, crossing his arms. "What, are we going to serenade the aliens into submission?" "I'm serious," I said, frustration boiling over. "What if we focused on communication instead? Maybe we can establish a dialogue before resorting to violence." "While the aliens are preparing to attack?" Harkins shot back, incredulous. "That's naive, Marcus. We're not going to charm them with a song." "Fine," I replied, my voice low. "But I refuse to let this turn us into something we're not. I refuse to let our fear dictate our actions." Harkins opened his mouth to respond, but the sudden blaring of alarms interrupted us. "Alert! Incoming transmission!" Alvarez shouted, scrambling to the control panel. I felt my heart drop as I turned to the monitor, dread settling in my stomach. The screen flickered, revealing a live feed from the alien ship, their alien symbols glowing ominously. "What do they want?" Harkins demanded, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Stand by," Alvarez replied, his fingers flying over the controls. "I'm trying to establish a connection." "Prepare for anything," I warned, bracing myself for whatever was about to unfold. The screen stabilized, and a figure appeared, a tall alien, its features angular and unsettling. The image flickered with static, but its intent was clear. "Human," it spoke, its voice a low, resonating sound that vibrated through the air. "We seek negotiation." A wave of shock rippled through the room. "Negotiation?" Harkins echoed, disbelief coloring his tone. "What do they want?" "Turn off your weapon," the alien said, its eyes locking onto the camera. "We offer terms." I exchanged glances with Harkins and the others, confusion swirling in my mind. This was unexpected. Our first encounter with the aliens had been fraught with hostility, but now they were offering to talk? "Why should we trust you?" Harkins challenged, his voice steady but cautious. "Trust is irrelevant," the alien replied, its tone firm. "We do not wish for conflict. Your presence disrupts the balance of our systems. We seek to restore it." My mind raced as I processed the implications. "What does that mean?" I asked, curiosity edging out my skepticism. "It means we wish to coexist," the alien responded. "But only if you abandon your weapon." "Do you think we can just turn off the technology that's kept us alive?" Harkins countered, his frustration boiling over. "The choice is yours," the alien stated, its voice unwavering. "But know this, the use of that weapon will bring destruction to your people." A chill ran down my spine as the weight of the alien's words settled over me. We had thought ourselves the hunters, but perhaps we were the hunted, caught in a web of our own making. "We need time to discuss this," I said, raising my hand to calm the mounting tension. "We can't just decide this in a moment. Lives are at stake." "Agreed," Harkins added, his expression shifting. "But if they're serious about negotiation, we have to approach this carefully. We can't risk angering them further." As the alien nodded in agreement, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was an opportunity, a chance to bridge the divide between us and the coalition. But the shadows of doubt loomed large in my mind. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me, every decision branching into unknown territory. "We'll consider your terms," I said, my voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "But we will not disarm until we're certain your intentions are genuine." The alien's gaze bore into me, a mixture of understanding and caution flickering across its features. "Fair. We will await your decision." As the feed cut off, I felt a whirlwind of emotions swirl around me, hope, fear, determination, and confusion all colliding into one. "Did that really just happen?" Alvarez breathed, disbelief etched across his face. "It did," Harkins said, his expression shifting from shock to contemplation. "But we need to be careful. If they're willing to talk, we have to consider the implications." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle upon my shoulders. This was a pivotal point in our journey, a chance to redefine our approach. "But we can't ignore the fact that we're still in danger," I said, my voice firm. "The aliens won't hesitate to attack again if they feel threatened. We need to prepare, just in case." Harkins nodded, but his expression remained conflicted. "Right? We can work on the sound technology while also pursuing a dialogue. But we must refine it for defense, just in case this doesn't go the way we hope." "Exactly," I agreed, feeling a flicker of unity spark within the group. "We can use the sound technology to create a more stable environment while also keeping our options open." As we began to strategize, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but we were no longer facing it alone. Together, we would navigate the complexities of our situation, standing at the crossroads of survival and ethics. The choice lay before us, and with every heartbeat, I felt the weight of our decisions ripple through the fabric of our existence. The consequences of power loomed large, but we would face them head-on. The flickering monitor cast an eerie glow over the control room as we huddled around the communication console. The tension in the air was palpable, each of us grappling with the implications of the recent alien transmission. Just hours earlier, we had received a message proposing a truce, and while some of my team members were eager to accept, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. "Did they really think we'd just take them at their word?" I muttered, crossing my arms as I leaned against the cold metal surface of the console. The aliens' words echoed in my mind, their claims of seeking peace feeling more like a calculated ploy than an honest overture. "Maybe they're genuine," Alvarez suggested, his brow furrowed in thought. "They've seen what we can do with our sound technology. Perhaps they realize conflict would only lead to more losses for both sides." "Or perhaps they're stalling," Harkins countered sharply, his expression hardening. "If we drop our defenses, it gives them an opportunity to strike when we're most vulnerable." I watched as the debate unfolded, the atmosphere thick with conflicting opinions. Some team members leaned toward diplomacy, hopeful that a truce could lead to a peaceful coexistence, while others mirrored my skepticism, convinced that accepting their terms would be a grave mistake. "Let's consider our options," I said, trying to quell the rising tension. "We need to analyze their motives and determine if this is a genuine offer or a strategic maneuver. We can't afford to be naive." "What's the plan, Marcus?" Harkins asked, his eyes narrowing. "Are we going to just sit here and hope for the best?" I paused, feeling the weight of leadership settle heavily upon my shoulders. "We need to buy time. While the team debates the truce, I'll continue my research on the sound frequencies. If we can develop a better understanding of how to manipulate the creature's behavior, it could give us the upper hand, whether we choose to negotiate or prepare for conflict." "Agreed," Alvarez chimed in, his tone shifting toward support. If we can find a way to influence the creatures positively, it might even strengthen our position in negotiations. As the discussion continued, I could sense a subtle shift in the team's dynamics. There were glimmers of hope in some eyes, while others remained vigilant, their distrust simmering just beneath the surface. I knew I had to tread carefully, balancing the desire for peace with the need for preparation. "Let's split into groups," I proposed, my voice steady. "Some of us can focus on the research and continue refining the sound technology, while others can work on drafting a formal response to the alien coalition. We can frame our terms for negotiation without fully disarming." With a mix of reluctance and determination, the team members nodded, and we began to divide our tasks. I made my way to the lab, the familiar hum of equipment welcoming me as I settled into my work. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, but I channeled that pressure into focus. I pulled up the data from my previous experiments, poring over the sound frequencies we had used to repel both the creatures and the aliens. My mind raced as I considered the possibilities. If I could isolate the specific frequencies that disrupted the creature's behavior, perhaps I could create a system that would not only protect us, but also calm the local fauna. As I immersed myself in my research, the hours slipped away unnoticed. The sound of machinery whirring and data processing surrounded me like a comforting blanket. I felt the thrill of discovery surging within me, each new frequency I tested revealing another layer of potential. "Marcus," a voice called, breaking my concentration. I turned to see Langley standing in the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, pushing aside my notes. "I know you're focused on the research, but we need to talk about the alien transmission." "Some of the team is getting restless," she said, stepping further into the lab. "They want to respond and set up a meeting." "Have you seen the data from my latest tests?" I asked, motioning toward the screen filled with graphs and sound wave patterns. "If we can manipulate the frequencies to calm the creatures, it might give us an advantage." "I get that, but what if the aliens are serious?" Langley pressed, her brows furrowing. "If we can establish a truce, we might have a chance to explore the planet safely without being on guard all the time." I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. "But what if it's a trap? We could disarm ourselves and expose our vulnerabilities, giving them the chance to take advantage of us. Or we could end up in a cycle of violence that leads to more losses," she countered. "We can't keep fighting forever. At some point, we need to consider a different approach." "I'm not against negotiation," I said, my voice firm. "But I refuse to go into it without being prepared. I want to make sure we have every possible option on the table before we make a decision." Langley studied me for a moment, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. "I trust your instincts, Marcus, but we need to move quickly. If we keep stalling, we may miss our chance." "I know," I replied, forcing a calmness I didn't quite feel. "Let me finish my research on the sound frequencies. Once we have a solid foundation, I'll be more willing to engage in negotiations. But I need to know we have a means of defending ourselves if it comes to that." She nodded, and with that, she left the lab, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the data before me. The more I delved into my research, the more excited I became about the possibilities. For days, I worked tirelessly, refining the frequencies, running tests, and collecting data. Each breakthrough felt like a small victory, pushing me closer to the solution I sought. But in the back of my mind, the specter of the alien coalition loomed large. As I continued my work, I also kept an ear to the ground regarding the team's discussions about the truce. I overheard snippets of conversations, heated debates between those who wanted to accept the aliens' offer and those who remained cautious. "I can't believe you'd even consider it," I heard Kendra say one day, her voice laced with frustration. "They've already shown they're willing to fight. Why would we trust them now?" "Because we're running out of options," another team member replied. "If we can find a way to coexist, it could save us all." The split was growing deeper, and I knew I had to address it before it tore the team apart. I gathered everyone in the main common area one evening, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. "Listen up, everyone," I began, feeling the weight of their gazes on me. "I know there are strong feelings about the alien transmission. Some of you are eager for peace, while others are understandably cautious. I want to hear your thoughts, but I need us to remain united. We can't let internal conflict distract us from our mission." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, but the tension was still palpable. "Let's remember that we're all on the same side here," I continued. "We have a unique opportunity to negotiate, but while we consider that, I want to reassure you all that my research on sound technology is progressing. I'm working on finding frequencies that could potentially alter the creature's behavior." "Can you guarantee it will work?" Harkins asked, his skepticism evident. "No, but I'm making progress," I replied, meeting his gaze head-on. "If we can manipulate the creatures, it could give us leverage in negotiations. It's a way to show the aliens we're serious about coexistence." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. "Let's keep an open mind. We can explore the possibility of a truce while also preparing for the worst. It's not about choosing sides, it's about being ready for whatever comes next." As the discussion unfolded, I could see the divisions begin to soften, the collective tension easing as everyone shared their concerns and hopes. "We'll give the aliens a chance to prove their intentions," Langley said, her voice steady. "But we'll also prepare for the possibility of conflict. It's the best of both worlds." With that, we began to discuss a formal response to the aliens, laying out our terms for negotiation while ensuring we maintained our defenses. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, grateful that we were moving forward together. In the days that followed, I continued my research, refining the sound frequencies and testing their effects on the local fauna. With each successful test, I felt more confident in our ability to protect ourselves while also exploring the possibility of a diplomatic solution. As I delved deeper into my work, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing at a crossroads. The decisions we made in the coming days would shape the fate of not just our team, but the entire future of Caltris. I knew I had to be vigilant, always questioning, always seeking the truth beneath the surface. The world was complex, and the choices we faced were anything but simple. But as long as we stood together, united in purpose, I believed we had a chance. We were on the brink of something monumental, and I was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The silence of the lab was unsettling, broken only by the rhythmic humming of the equipment. I sat hunched over my workstation, the glow of the monitor illuminating my focused expression. My recent experiments had produced promising results, and I felt a renewed sense of hope for our team's future. If I could refine the sound frequencies just a little more, we might not only safeguard our outpost, but also create a means for coexistence with the alien coalition. But as I was about to run another simulation, a sudden flicker of darkness enveloped the screen. The lights dimmed, and my heart raced as I glanced around the lab, confusion washing over me. "Alvarez, did you adjust the power settings?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the quiet room. No answer came. I hurriedly checked the connections, my hands trembling as I felt the cold metal of the console. A chill crept up my spine as I realized that the power surge hadn't just flickered. It had completely shorted out my equipment. "Damn it," I growled, scrambling to re-establish the connection. But as I did, a deep unease settled in my stomach. It felt like more than just a malfunction. Something was off. I threw myself into troubleshooting, but moments later, the screens went dark again, the alarms blaring as the lab was plunged into chaos. I fought to keep my breathing steady, frustration mounting as I tried to regain control over the equipment. "Marcus," Alvarez burst into the lab, eyes wide with panic. "The main generator is offline. It looks like it was intentionally tampered with." "What do you mean tampered with?" I snapped, still desperately trying to restore power. "Who would do that?" "I don't know, but I've seen signs of sabotage. The wiring's been cut, and several critical systems are down." He moved quickly to help me, but the damage was extensive, and time was running out. "Why would anyone sabotage us now?" I muttered, my mind racing as I thought back to the mounting tensions within the team. We had been divided over the alien transmission, and I knew distrust was brewing. But I hadn't thought anyone would go this far. As we worked, I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The clock was ticking, and with the alien coalition closing in, we couldn't afford setbacks. "Let's get the backup systems up," I said, urgency fueling my voice. "We need to restore communication and re-establish our defenses." Alvarez nodded, and together, we raced against the clock. We reconnected wires and bypass systems, but the damage was extensive, and our window of opportunity was narrowing. Suddenly, the door swung open, and I turned to see Langley and Harkins entering, their faces drawn with worry. "Have you guys seen the state of the equipment?" Harkins barked, eyes darting around the lab. "Everything's in shambles. It's like someone wanted to destroy our chances of survival." "We're working on it," I snapped, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "We need to focus on getting the backup systems online. The aliens are almost here, and we're running out of time." As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Glancing over my shoulder, I noticed a shadow lurking near the door. I turned my attention back to the task at hand, trying to push aside the creeping paranoia. "We've got to figure out who did this," Langley said, her voice tight with tension. "This could be a major setback for us." "Right now, we need to prioritize getting the systems back online," I said, trying to keep my focus. "Once we're operational, we can figure out who we can trust." Time dragged on as we fought to restore our systems, the pressure mounting with every passing moment. Just as we managed to reboot the backup generator, a loud crash echoed through the facility, shaking the walls. "What the hell was that?" Harkins shouted, rushing toward the exit. "Stay here," I ordered, my heart racing. "We need to secure the lab first." But the sound of footsteps rushing past us cut through the tension, and I exchanged a worried glance with Alvarez. "We can't let anyone get to the sound weapon," he said, determination flooding his voice. "If they disable it, we'll be defenseless." With that, we bolted out of the lab, moving quickly through the corridors. The sounds of chaos surrounded us, shouts and the distant sounds of skirmishes filled the air, heightening our sense of urgency. As we navigated through the facility, I noticed signs of struggle in several rooms, furniture overturned, equipment destroyed. The sense of betrayal washed over me like a cold wave, and my mind raced with possibilities. Who among us could be responsible for this? The thought gnawed at me as we rounded a corner and stumbled into the main control room. "What happened here?" I gasped, taking in the wreckage. Several monitors lay shattered, cables dangling like lifeless snakes, and the atmosphere felt thick with panic. "We're under attack," someone shouted from behind a barricade. "The aliens breached the perimeter." I gritted my teeth, frustration mixing with fear. "We need to regroup. We can't afford to lose anyone else." As we hurried to secure our defenses, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just an external threat. It was an inside job, a betrayal lurking in our midst. "Langley," I shouted, scanning the room for her. "We need to coordinate our defenses." She emerged from behind a barricade, her face pale but determined. "What do we do now?" "First, we need to assess the situation," I said, my mind racing. "Gather the others. We'll figure out how to hold off the aliens while we identify who sabotaged our efforts." "On it," Langley nodded, her expression resolute as she moved to gather the team. As we fortified our positions, the sounds of the battle outside intensified. I could hear the alien coalition moving closer, their technology whirring ominously. The weight of the situation pressed down on me as I prepared for what was to come. "We can't let them in," Harkins said, voice steady. "We need to hold this position." Just then, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, a figure slipping through the shadows. I turned, my heart racing as I instinctively reached for my weapon. "Who's there?" I called, tension rippling through the air. A familiar face emerged from the darkness, and my blood ran cold. It was one of our team members, glaring defiantly, their eyes glinting with a mix of fear and determination. "I couldn't let you all keep this going," they said, voice low and shaking. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." "What are you talking about?" I shot back, confusion mingling with anger. "You've jeopardized everything. We're fighting for our lives here." "I was trying to protect us," they shouted, desperation creeping into their tone. "The aliens." "Enough," I interrupted, my voice firm. "You've put us all at risk, and I can't trust you anymore." The atmosphere thickened with tension as the realization sank in. We were dealing with a traitor among us, someone willing to risk everything for their beliefs. "Marcus," Alvarez said, stepping forward, "what do we do? We can't let this go unpunished." I turned to the traitor, my heart racing. "You need to decide, are you with us or against us?" "I'm trying to save us from the danger that you're blind to," they insisted, but I saw the fear in their eyes, the cracks in their resolve. "Your actions have consequences," I said firmly, "and right now, those consequences are costing us dearly." With that, I motioned for Alvarez and Harkins to take them into custody, a sense of resolve flooding through me. We couldn't afford to let betrayal tear us apart, not when the aliens were closing in. As we secured the traitor, the battle outside raged on. I felt the adrenaline coursing through my veins, the stakes higher than ever. It was a test of our resolve, a desperate fight against both external threats and the treachery within our own ranks. I had no idea how this would end, but one thing was clear: we had to stand united, even in the face of betrayal. And if we were to survive, we would need to confront both the aliens and the darkness within our own team. "Get ready," I shouted, rallying the remaining team members. "We fight for our lives together." The air was thick with tension as I stood in the dimly lit lab, surrounded by the remnants of what had once been a bustling hub of research and discovery. Equipment lay strewn about, wires exposed like the innards of a living creature. I could feel the weight of our circumstances pressing down on me, each moment dragging out in a way that made it hard to breathe. But amid the chaos, I sensed a flicker of hope igniting within me. "Marcus, are you okay?" Alvarez's voice broke through my concentration as he entered the lab, his face lined with concern. "You've been at it for hours." "I'm fine," I replied, though my voice wavered slightly. "I think I might have stumbled onto something." Alvarez raised an eyebrow, skepticism mingling with curiosity. "What do you mean?" I gestured toward the disassembled equipment scattered across my workstation. "I've been thinking about the way sound interacts with both the local creatures and the alien technology. What if we could layer sound frequencies? Manipulate them in such a way that we could not only defend ourselves against the aliens, but also control the local fauna." He stepped closer, studying my scattered notes. "You mean, create a sort of harmonic control?" "Yes," I exclaimed, feeling a surge of excitement. "By using multiple frequencies simultaneously, we might be able to produce a resonance that disrupts the alien tech while simultaneously calming the creatures outside. It's risky, but it could turn the environment into a defense system itself." Alvarez frowned, skepticism lingering. "But that's a lot of variables, Marcus. You're talking about manipulating sound waves in real time while being attacked. It could backfire." "I know," I replied, feeling the weight of his words. "But we've run out of options. If the aliens come back, we need to be prepared. This could be our best shot at survival." "All right, but we need a plan," he said, determination flashing in his eyes. "We can't afford to fail again." After discussing the finer points of the harmonic control system, we set to work, a mix of urgency and excitement fueling our efforts. I focused on assembling the remaining equipment, my mind racing as I visualized the sound patterns I would need to generate. As we worked, I could hear the distant sounds of conflict echoing through the corridors. The atmosphere was thick with uncertainty, and every distant explosion sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. I glanced up at Alvarez, who was busy configuring the necessary software for the sound modulation. "This is it," I said, my voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at me. "If we can get this working, we could change the game. Just make sure you've accounted for all variables, Alvarez replied, glancing at me with a hint of concern. "The last thing we need is to amplify the aliens' technology instead of neutralizing it." "I'm aware," I said, pushing back the nagging doubts creeping into my mind. "Let's run a few tests first to see if we can isolate the right frequencies before trying it on the aliens." We spent the next hour setting up the equipment, calibrating the sound generators, and testing various frequency combinations. The room pulsed with energy as the sounds echoed off the walls, each experiment bringing us closer to the breakthrough we desperately needed. After what felt like an eternity, we were finally ready to put the harmonic control system to the test. My heart raced as I activated the main console, and a symphony of layered sounds began to resonate through the lab. "Can you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, it's beautiful," Alvarez replied, his eyes wide with awe. But beauty quickly turned into tension as we both sensed the underlying danger. The sound waves pulsed, vibrating through the air, and I could almost feel the energy shifting around us. I turned back to the console, my hands flying across the controls as I tweaked the frequencies, fine-tuning the output. "I'm going to increase the amplitude. Brace yourself." Alvarez nodded, gripping the edge of the workstation as I dialed up the power. The sound intensified, washing over us like a wave, and I felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with trepidation. "Now, let's see if we can disrupt some of that alien tech," I said, focusing my mind on the task at hand. As I concentrated, I began to layer additional frequencies, creating a complex web of sound that wrapped around us. The air crackled with energy, and for a brief moment, I felt as if I were standing at the center of a storm, alive with possibility. Then, the console flashed an alert. "Marcus, we're picking up a signal," Alvarez shouted, his eyes wide with alarm. "From the aliens?" I asked, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Yeah, and they're moving closer." He rapidly assessed the data on the screen. "They must have detected the sound." I gritted my teeth, realizing the urgency of our situation. We need to accelerate the test. If we can disrupt their technology now, we might gain the upper hand. With a deep breath, I focused on the sound waves, guiding the frequencies toward the incoming signal. My heart pounded as I sent out the layered resonance, watching the monitor as the alien signal began to fluctuate. "It's working," Alvarez shouted, excitement lacing his voice. "Look at the feedback." The display showed the alien signals distorting, a cascade of interference spreading through their systems. I couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph, but it was short-lived. Suddenly, the vibrations in the air shifted, and a deep, menacing growl echoed from outside the lab. I exchanged a worried glance with Alvarez, fear tightening my chest. "They're responding to our sound waves," I said, my voice low. "We've stirred them up." Before I could react, the ground shook violently, and the sound of claws scraping against metal filled the air. "Get ready," I shouted, adrenaline surging as I scrambled to stabilize the frequencies. "We need to maintain control." We both jumped into action, but the chaotic feedback made it difficult to keep the system steady. I focused, layering the frequencies, trying to guide them toward the approaching threat. "Hold on," I yelled, heart racing as I prepared for the worst. With a final adjustment, I released a powerful wave of sound, and a surge of energy pulsed through the lab. The vibrations intensified, echoing out into the open air, reverberating with an almost palpable force. Outside, I could hear the creatures reacting violently to the sound, their growls mingling with the chaotic symphony we had unleashed. I tightened my grip on the console, willing the frequencies to maintain their balance. "Marcus, look!" Alvarez shouted, pointing at the screen. I turned to see the alien signals flickering, their response wavering as the sound waves clashed with their technology. For a moment, it felt like we had found a key to our salvation. But then the monitor erupted with warnings, and I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. "Something's wrong," I shouted, panic clawing at my throat. The vibrations grew erratic, the frequencies spiraling out of control. I fought to regain control, but the console sparked ominously, and I could feel the system pushing back against me. "Shut it down," Alvarez yelled, fear lacing his voice. "No," I countered, fighting against the chaos. "If we can just stabilize it." But it was too late. The harmonic control surged, the sound waves erupting into a deafening crescendo. I felt a wave of energy wash over me, disorienting and overwhelming, before everything went black. The darkness faded, and I found myself on the ground, disoriented. I blinked rapidly, trying to regain my bearings, and as I pushed myself up, I could hear a low rumble in the distance. "Alvarez," I called, voice hoarse. "Over here," he replied, groaning as he sat up. I looked around, heart racing as I assessed the damage. The lab was in disarray, equipment scattered, but I could hear the sounds of chaos outside, creatures roaring and alien technology whirring ominously. Did we succeed?" I asked, my mind racing. "I think so," Alvarez said, still catching his breath. "But at what cost?" I felt a heavy weight settle in my chest as I surveyed the remnants of our work. We had unlocked something powerful, but it was clear that we had pushed the limits. "Let's regroup," I said, determination flooding my voice. "We can't lose hope now." Together, we crawled through the wreckage, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. We had stumbled upon a breakthrough, but it came with risks and consequences we hadn't fully anticipated. As we moved toward the exit, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The harmonic control had the potential to change everything, but we would need to be cautious. Once outside, the cacophony of battle greeted us. The alien coalition was engaged with the creatures of Caltris, the battlefield shifting with a chaos of sound and fury. I could feel the pulse of our experiments in the air, the vibrations we had unleashed resonating through the environment. "Time to put this knowledge to use," I said, steeling myself for what was to come. The battle raged on, but now we had a chance to harness the power of sound and fight back. The atmosphere in the outpost was electric, charged with an unsettling mix of anticipation and dread. Outside, the alien coalition had begun their full-scale assault, the distant echoes of their ships rumbling through the ground like thunder. Inside, I could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on my shoulders as I prepared for the fight of our lives. "Marcus," Alvarez's voice broke through my thoughts as he burst into the command center, his face pale. "They're coming in fast. We need to make a decision, now." I turned from the console, my heart racing. "I know. We need to set up the harmonic control system. It's our only chance to turn the tide." "Are you sure about this?" Alvarez asked, skepticism etched on his features. "The last time we activated it, we barely escaped with our lives." "I'm aware of that, but we can't just sit back and hope they don't find us." "The harmonic control is our best weapon," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of uncertainty inside me. "But what if it backfires again?" Another team member, Jenkins, chimed in, his brow furrowed with concern. "We can't afford another failure." "Look," I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. "We've been through this. The harmonic control is the only way we can disrupt their technology and keep the creatures at bay. We either fight back or get overrun. It's our choice." "Doesn't feel like a choice to me," Alvarez muttered under his breath, crossing his arms. I could sense the unease rippling through the team, each member weighing their fears against the gravity of our situation. The tension was palpable, a silent battle brewing between our instincts for survival and the unknown risks that lay ahead. "Listen to me," I said, raising my voice to cut through the uncertainty. "We've trained for moments like this. We've prepared for the worst, and now it's here. If we want to survive, we have to trust in what we've learned. I need you to believe in this." I locked eyes with each member of the team, hoping to ignite a spark of determination within them. "Together, we can do this. We can make this work." As the words hung in the air, I saw the flicker of resolve in some of their eyes, but doubt lingered in the others. "All right, let's do it," Alvarez said reluctantly, though I could see the hesitation still etched on his face. "But if this fails, I want everyone to know that we did it your way." "Fair enough," I replied, my heart pounding as I moved toward the console. Let's get to work. The team rallied around me, each member focusing on their designated tasks. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I activated the harmonic control system, the familiar hum of machinery filling the room. "Jenkins, check the sound generators," I called out, watching as he hurried to the equipment. Alvarez began monitoring the incoming alien signals, his fingers flying over the console. "They're getting closer. We need to hurry." As we worked, I could feel the clock ticking down, each second bringing us closer to an inevitable confrontation. I focused on the task at hand, layering the frequencies in my mind as I concentrated on the delicate balance we needed to strike. But even as I set up the system, the arguments continued to swirl around me, the tension within the team rising. "Are we really going to put our lives on the line for this?" one of the newer recruits, Marlowe, asked, his voice trembling with fear. "What if it doesn't work?" I turned to him, my expression firm. "We're already in danger. The aliens won't hold back, and neither will the creatures outside. We can't wait for a miracle. We need to create our own." "But what about the last time?" he pressed, desperation creeping into his tone. "What if we end up making things worse?" I took a deep breath, fighting to remain calm. "I understand your fear, but this is our chance to take control. We can't let them dictate our fate." Marlowe's shoulders slumped, and I could see the conflict warring within him. "Just give me a shot," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "If it doesn't work, I'll take full responsibility." He looked at me for a long moment, searching my face for assurance. Finally, he nodded, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. "Okay, but we need to be ready to adapt if things go south," he said, his voice steadier. "Agreed," I replied, turning back to the console, determination flooding through me. "Let's make it work." As the minutes ticked by, we worked feverishly to finalize the harmonic control setup. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing second, the tension between the team members echoing the impending conflict outside. I could hear the distant roar of alien engines and the thrum of their landing craft approaching. "Marcus, they're launching an assault," Alvarez shouted, his voice urgent. "We need to activate the system now." "Almost there," I replied, my fingers racing over the controls as I layered the frequencies. The harmonic control system began to hum, a low vibration resonating through the room. "Ready?" I asked, glancing around at my team. "Let's do this," Alvarez said, determination flashing in his eyes. With a deep breath, I initiated the harmonic control. The sound waves surged out, filling the air with an intensity that made the ground shake beneath our feet. "Here we go," I said, my heart racing as the frequencies radiated outward. The monitors lit up with incoming data, the alien signals flickering as they collided with the harmonic waves. For a moment, everything felt alive, the energy pulsing through us, resonating with hope. But then, a sudden crash echoed from outside, and I felt the ground tremble. The outpost shook violently, and alarms blared around us. "Marcus!" Alvarez shouted, panic in his voice. "They're coming in." I could see the fear in my team's eyes, but I pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand. "Keep the harmonic frequencies steady. We need to maintain control." The sound waves rippled outward, and I could see the alien forces being pushed back, their technology faltering against the resonating frequencies. The ground shook again, and I clenched my fists, willing the system to hold. But as I focused, a new sound pierced through the chaos, the roar of creatures outside, their growls rising in response to the sound waves. "What's happening?" Jenkins yelled, fear etched across his face. "They're reacting to the sound," I shouted, feeling the tension swell. "We need to modulate the frequencies, find a way to calm them down." Alvarez and the team worked quickly, but I could see the chaos spiraling out of control. The creatures surged toward the outpost, drawn in by the sound waves we had unleashed. "Hold them back," I yelled, desperation creeping into my voice. "We need to stabilize the system." The alarms blared as the creatures clawed at the walls of the outpost, their feral growls filling the air. I felt the weight of our decision crashing down around us, the stakes rising higher with every passing moment. "Marcus, we can't hold them off forever," Jenkins shouted, fear pouring from him. I gritted my teeth, my heart racing as I pushed the harmonic control to its limits. "We have to trust that this will work." As the creatures pressed against the walls, I could feel the tension between the team members reaching a breaking point. They exchanged fearful glances, and I knew that I had to act quickly. "Everyone, focus," I shouted, urgency echoing in my voice. "We need to layer the frequencies to create a barrier. Trust in what we've built." With that, I concentrated, layering the sounds, the frequencies colliding and creating a wave of energy that surged outward. The creatures responded, their movements shifting as the harmonic control pulsed through the air. The roar of the creatures began to falter, and I felt a rush of triumph flooding through me. "It's working, keep it steady." But just as the tide began to turn, the alarms blared louder, and a deafening crash reverberated through the outpost. "Marcus, they're breaching the outer wall," Alvarez yelled, panic creeping into his voice. My heart sank as I realized the enormity of our situation. We were out of time. "Prepare for impact," I shouted, my voice barely rising above the chaos. As the alien forces surged forward, I pushed the harmonic control to its limits, channeling every ounce of energy I had into the sound waves. The room trembled, and I felt the ground shake beneath me as the world erupted into chaos. "Hold on," I yelled, feeling the vibrations surge through me. In that moment, I understood that we had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. The outcome of our actions would define our fate, and I had to trust in the power of the harmonic control to save us. The moment the alien forces breached the outer wall, chaos erupted. The outpost was plunged into an all-out war zone, and the air was thick with the sound of clashing metal, the hum of machinery, and the primal roars of creatures stirred into a frenzy. "Marcus, they're coming in from the north," Alvarez shouted, his voice barely audible above the din. He was stationed at the observation deck, his eyes fixed on the approaching alien troops that surged toward us, armored figures glinting ominously under the stark lighting of the outpost. "Activate the harmonic system," I ordered, adrenaline surging through me. I rushed to the control panel, my heart pounding as I prepared to unleash our last line of defense. The console hummed beneath my fingers as I flipped the activation switch, and a surge of energy coursed through the equipment. Instantly, the harmonic frequencies radiated out from the speakers, creating a sonic wave that filled the air with an otherworldly resonance. "Engaging now," I yelled, watching as the waves cascaded outward, rippling across the battlefield. The immediate effect was staggering. Alien soldiers staggered, their movements faltering as they clutched their heads, disoriented by the unexpected sonic assault. Their advanced technology, which had seemed so formidable moments before, began to glitch and flicker. The creatures, too, were caught in the chaos, their growls rising into a cacophony of confusion. "Look at them," Jenkins exclaimed, his eyes wide with astonishment as he pointed outside. "It's working, they can't handle it." But as I watched, a wave of unease washed over me. The creatures, usually aggressive but somewhat predictable, were becoming increasingly frantic. Their instincts kicked in, driven by fear and confusion. "Marcus," Alvarez called out again, his voice tinged with urgency. "The creatures are reacting to the sound. They're getting agitated." "I see it," I shouted back, my fingers racing over the controls. "We need to adjust the frequencies before they overwhelm us." As I manipulated the controls, I could feel the sound waves shifting around us. The harmonic system was powerful, but it was also a double-edged sword. The very frequencies that disoriented the aliens were also inciting the creature's primal instincts. "Crank it down. Lower the amplitude," I barked, trying to find the right balance. Alvarez nodded, adjusting the controls. "But if we lower it too much, we risk losing our advantage against the aliens." "I know," I snapped, frustration boiling beneath my skin. "We can't let the creatures overrun us. We have to keep the aliens off balance while managing the local fauna." Just as I felt like I was gaining control, a new sound erupted outside, a deafening roar. One of the larger local creatures, a massive beast that had been roused from its lair, charged at the outpost, its eyes wild with fury. "Get back!" I yelled, but it was too late. The creature slammed into the barricades, sending debris flying and forcing us to brace for impact. "Reinforcements coming in from the east," Jenkins shouted, his voice strained as he monitored the incoming signals. "We're surrounded." I gritted my teeth, focusing on the console. I had to make this work. As the alien troops regrouped, I adjusted the sound frequencies once more, desperately trying to keep both the aliens and the creatures off balance. "Activate the secondary generators," I shouted. "We need to amplify the sound waves and create a barrier around the outpost." The room shook as the harmonic control resonated with newfound intensity. The wave of sound rippled outward, clashing with the alien forces as they tried to regroup and form a defensive line. "Get ready," I yelled, feeling the weight of our situation pressing down on me. "Hold the line." Outside, the battlefield transformed into a swirling mass of chaos. Alien troops struggled against the waves of sound, their ranks fracturing as they stumbled into one another. The creatures, caught between their instinct to flee and their drive to attack, charged headlong into the melee. "We're not going to survive this," Jenkins shouted, panic rising in his voice. "What if the creatures breach the perimeter?" "We'll hold them off," I snapped, trying to project confidence. "We have to trust in the harmonic system. We can do this." But as the creatures continued to clash against our defenses, I could feel the tides shifting. They were adapting to the sound waves, their aggression intensifying as they fought against the sonic barriers. "Marcus, they're breaking through," Alvarez yelled, his voice strained as he tried to fend off a creature that lunged at him. I shifted my focus, layering new frequencies into the harmonic control, desperate to create a sound that would calm the local fauna while still disrupting the aliens. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the outpost, sending me sprawling against the control panel. "Report," I shouted, pushing myself back up, adrenaline coursing through me. "South side breach," Jenkins gasped, his eyes wide with terror. "They're inside." "Activate the secondary defense measures," I yelled, scrambling to regain my footing. "We have to protect the core." Alvarez rushed to the auxiliary panel, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're losing power. The harmonic system is overloaded." "Reroute power from the backup generators," I shouted, my heart racing as I fought to maintain control. The sound waves surged around us, vibrating with an intensity that made my teeth rattle. I could feel the harmonic frequencies pushing against the walls of the outpost, the tension building as the battle raged outside. "We can't hold out much longer," Jenkins cried, fear lacing his voice. I grit my teeth, focusing on the controls. "Just hold on, we're not done yet." The creature outside was relentless, its roars mingling with the alien cries as they engaged in a desperate struggle. I could see the chaos unfolding before me, a battlefield filled with confusion, both alien and local creatures clashing in a frenzied attempt to overpower one another. "Change the frequencies," I yelled, desperation creeping into my voice. "We need to create a resonance that can calm them down, now." Alvarez nodded, adjusting the settings as I focused on maintaining the barrier. The harmonic waves pulsed, the sound shifting and bending in response to the chaos outside. "Keep it steady," I shouted, feeling the pressure mounting. "We can't lose control now." Just as I thought we were gaining a semblance of control, another explosion rocked the outpost, sending debris raining down. The room shuddered, and I felt the ground beneath me tremble. "More creatures are coming in," Jenkins shouted, his voice filled with panic. "We're getting overwhelmed." "Reinforce the barriers," I yelled, my mind racing. "We need to push back against the creatures while maintaining our defense against the aliens." The chaos swirled around us, and I could feel the harmonic control system vibrating beneath my fingertips, struggling to maintain the delicate balance. The frequencies I had created were slipping through my grasp, the cacophony of battle overwhelming my senses. "Marcus," Alvarez called out, his voice strained. What do we do now? We fight, I shouted, my determination hardening into resolve. We fight until the very end. As I activated the harmonic control once more, a surge of energy coursed through the system, resonating outward in a final bid for control. The sound waves rippled into the battlefield, crashing against the alien forces and the rampaging creatures. The moment felt like an eternity, suspended in time as the sound waves collided with the chaos. The aliens faltered, their technology flickering as they struggled against the disorienting frequencies. The creatures, too, felt the impact, their frenzied movements slowing as the waves of sound washed over them. "Keep pushing," I yelled, my heart racing as I fought to maintain control. But just as I felt the tide begin to shift in our favor, a loud crash resonated through the outpost, and I turned to see a creature bursting through the barricades. "Look out!" Jenkins shouted, his eyes wide with terror. I barely had time to react as the creature charged at us, and I instinctively reached for the controls, adjusting the frequencies in a desperate attempt to repel it. The harmonic waves surged, colliding with the creature and momentarily stunning it. I seized the opportunity, pushing the frequencies to their limits, creating a barrier of sound that forced it back. But the moment was fleeting. The creature roared, recovering from the shock as it charged again, its primal instincts overriding the disorienting effects of the sound waves. "Focus," I yelled, my voice strained with urgency. "We need to hold the line." The battlefield around us devolved into a whirlwind of chaos and noise. I felt the weight of our situation pressing down on me, and the stakes grew ever higher as the battle raged on. "Marcus, we're losing power," Alvarez shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Redirect energy from the auxiliary systems," I barked, my heart pounding as I focused on the console. "We can't let this fail." The harmonic control system pulsed beneath my fingers, the sound waves resonating with an intensity that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I could feel the vibrations in my bones, the chaos around us spiraling out of control. Just as the creature charged again, the alien forces regrouped, their advanced technology threatening to overwhelm us. I gritted my teeth, refusing to back down. "We won't give up," I shouted, my voice rising above the chaos. "Not now, not ever." With that, I pushed the harmonic control to its limits, sending a final wave of sound crashing outward. The battlefield erupted into chaos, the air filled with a cacophony of alien screams and the roars of the creatures, drowning everything in an overwhelming tide of noise. And in that moment, I understood. This was our fight, our moment to reclaim our destiny against the odds. "Keep fighting," I yelled, determination coursing through me. "We're not done yet." The battlefield was a maelstrom of sound and fury. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and scorched earth, mingled with the cries of creatures and the frantic shouts of my team. The harmonic system pulsed with chaotic energy, a desperate heartbeat struggling to maintain a fragile balance in the midst of the chaos. "Marcus," Alvarez yelled, his voice barely cutting through the din. He was crouched beside me, sweat pouring down his brow as he monitored the control panel. "We're losing power fast. We won't be able to hold them off much longer." "I know," I shouted back, heart racing. "But if we can just hold on a little longer, we might be able to turn the tide." Outside, the creatures were charging the perimeter, their primal instincts driving them to madness as the harmonic waves battered their senses. The aliens, too, were regrouping, their technology flickering ominously as they tried to recover from the initial shock. I could see it in the faces of my team, fear, desperation, and a fierce determination. We were all in this together, but the weight of our choices pressed heavily upon me. "Marcus," Jenkins shouted, his voice strained as he surveyed the chaos outside. "We need to make a decision. We can't keep this up indefinitely." I clenched my fists, the reality of our situation dawning on me. The harmonic system was pushing to its limits, but there was one option left, a dangerous gamble that could either save us or doom us all. "Listen to me," I yelled, my voice cutting through the chaos. "I can overload the system. It will create a massive wave of sound, enough to repel both the aliens and the creatures. "Are you insane?" Alvarez shouted, eyes wide. "That would destroy our equipment. We'd be cut off from communication and defense." "I know," I replied, my heart pounding. "But if we don't act now, we won't survive. This is our only chance." The gravity of my decision settled over the team like a heavy fog. I could see the fear in their eyes, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. But beneath that fear was a flicker of hope, a shared understanding that we had come too far to back down now. "Marcus, if you do this," Jenkins hesitated, glancing at the chaotic scene outside. "We need to make sure it's worth it. We can't just throw away everything we've built." "I won't let it be in vain," I said, my resolve solidifying. "We'll channel everything into this final wave. It has to work." "Then let's make it happen," Alvarez shouted, determination rising in his voice. "We're with you." I nodded, my heart racing as I returned to the control panel. "Reroute all remaining power to the harmonic system. We'll need every ounce of energy we can muster." As my team scrambled to comply, I could feel the weight of our collective choice settling in. I had always known that leadership came with sacrifices, but this was different. This was about survival. The harmonic system began to pulse, responding to our commands as it absorbed the remaining energy reserves. The sound waves surged, resonating with an intensity that reverberated through the outpost. "Prepare for maximum output," I yelled, my voice rising above the chaos. "We're doing this." Outside, the battle raged on. The creatures, driven by their instincts, were clashing with the alien forces, creating a chaotic battlefield filled with confusion and violence. The harmonic waves trembled beneath my fingers, the system vibrating with power as I calibrated the settings. I could feel the weight of the moment, the tension hanging in the air like a taut string, ready to snap. "Hold steady," I commanded, my focus sharpening. "We're almost there." Alvarez monitored the energy levels, his eyes darting back and forth between the readings. "We're at critical levels. This is going to drain everything we have left." "I know," I replied, my heart racing. "But we don't have a choice. It's now or never." With a final deep breath, I slammed my hand down on the override switch. "Overload initiated," I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. The harmonic system shuddered violently, resonating with an intensity that made my teeth rattle. A brilliant wave of sound erupted from the speakers, an overwhelming force that surged outward, engulfing everything in its path. The moment felt surreal, suspended in time as the sound waves collided with the chaos of the battlefield. The creatures paused mid-charge, their instincts overwhelmed by the sheer power of the harmonic blast. The alien forces faltered, their technology sputtering and glitching as they fought to regain control. "Now, keep it going," I yelled, pushing the harmonic system to its limits. The sound waves surged, a tidal wave of resonance that washed over the battlefield. It was a beautiful, chaotic symphony, a final desperate effort to reclaim our survival against insurmountable odds. I could see the creatures retreating, their primal instincts kicking in as they fled from the overwhelming sound. The alien forces were also thrown into disarray, their ranks breaking apart as they struggled to recover from the sonic onslaught. "Push forward," I commanded, the sound waves reverberating around us. "We can turn this fight in our favor." But just as victory seemed within reach, the harmonic system began to sputter, warning lights flashing across the control panel. "Marcus," Alvarez shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "It's overheating. We need to stabilize it." I clenched my jaw, fighting against the mounting pressure. "There's no time. We have to maintain the output. We're so close." The battlefield transformed into a chaotic blend of sound and fury. The creatures were fleeing, and the alien forces were disoriented, scrambling to regroup. "We're not done yet," I yelled, determination fueling my resolve. "Hold the line." But the harmonic system was at its breaking point. I could feel the vibrations intensifying, the energy surging beyond its limits. "Overload imminent," the console warned, alarms blaring in response to the escalating chaos. "Redirect power from auxiliary systems," I commanded, desperately trying to stabilize the output. We can't let this fail now. As I scrambled to make the adjustments, a loud explosion rang out from the outskirts of the battlefield. "Look out!" Jenkins shouted, his eyes wide with terror as the ground shook beneath us. In an instant, the harmonic system blared a deafening warning, signaling the imminent overload. I could feel the power surging through the equipment, an overwhelming force ready to break free. "Hold on," I shouted, my voice a desperate plea. "We're almost there." With a final surge of energy, the harmonic waves erupted outward in a blinding flash of sound and light. And then everything went silent. The battlefield froze, suspended in a moment of stillness. The creatures halted, their instincts overridden by the shockwave of sound. The alien forces stood frozen, their technology rendered useless as the sound waves enveloped them. In that fleeting moment, I could feel the weight of our choices pressing down on us. "Did it work?" Alvarez whispered, disbelief creeping into his voice. As the sound waves reverberated through the battlefield, I could see the creatures and aliens retreating as their fear of the overwhelming sound waves pushing them away. "Victory!" I shouted, exhilaration flooding through me. But as the moment of triumph washed over us, I could feel the harmonic system shudder beneath my fingers. "Warning! Overload imminent!" The console blared, alarms ringing out in a desperate chorus. In an instant, the system overloaded, a blinding flash engulfing the room as the harmonic waves surged uncontrollably. "Get down!" I yelled, throwing myself to the ground as the equipment exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. The world erupted around me, a cacophony of sound and fury. I felt the heat wash over me, and everything went dark. I awoke to the distant hum of the outpost alarms, their blaring tone mingling with the scent of scorched metal and the sharp tang of burnt circuitry. The chaotic aftermath of the battle lingered in the air, an eerie silence falling over the once bustling research station. Slowly, I pushed myself upright, wincing at the dull ache in my body. I took in my surroundings, noting the twisted remnants of our equipment scattered across the floor, the aftermath of the overload that had shattered our defenses and thrown us into chaos. "Marcus!" a voice broke through the haze. It was Alvarez, crouched beside a console, his expression a mix of relief and disbelief. "You're awake. We thought we lost you." "What happened?" I asked, struggling to shake off the remnants of unconsciousness. "The harmonic system, it overloaded. But we managed to repel the aliens and the creatures. They're gone, at least for now." I glanced around the damaged outpost, taking in the remnants of our failed experiments and the debris from the final explosion. The reality of our situation settled in. The alien coalition had retreated, but we were left stranded. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, anxiety creeping into my voice. Alvarez nodded, though I could see the concern etched on his face. "A few injuries, but nothing fatal. We lost a lot of equipment, though. Communications are down, and the transport shuttle is damaged." My heart sank. We were isolated, trapped in this hostile environment with no way to call for help. The weight of our choices hung heavily in the air, mingling with the smoke and remnants of our past efforts. As I surveyed the destruction, my thoughts turned inward. I had always believed in the power of technology, how it could be used to enhance our understanding of the universe. But now, as I stared at the wreckage of our work, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had also wielded it as a weapon, a tool of destruction that had almost cost us everything. "Marcus," Alvarez interrupted my thoughts, his voice breaking the silence. "What do we do now?" I took a deep breath, the gravity of our situation weighing on my shoulders. "We regroup. We need to assess the damage and find a way to repair our communications. If we can get a signal out, we might be able to call for rescue." As we began the process of clearing the wreckage, I noticed the others gathering, their expressions reflecting a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Jenkins approached, a grim determination in his eyes. "Marcus, we need to talk about what happened," he said, glancing back at the damaged harmonic system. "We pushed the technology to its limits, and it almost cost us our lives." "I know," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside me. But we also defended ourselves against an overwhelming force. The sound technology saved us. Or it nearly destroyed us, Jenkins countered. We need to find a balance. Technology can be a double-edged sword, and we must tread carefully. His words resonated deeply. I had seen firsthand the consequences of our actions, how the desire for power and control had led us to the brink of disaster. I realized that we had a responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to the world around us. As we worked together, clearing debris and assessing the damage, I couldn't shake the feeling of reflection that hung in the air. I had always believed that knowledge was a gift, but now I understood that it came with a price. The pursuit of understanding could lead to both enlightenment and destruction. Hours passed as we toiled, piecing together what remained of our equipment. The tension among us began to ease as we focused on survival, each small victory a testament to our resilience. "Marcus," Alvarez called, pulling me from my thoughts. "I think I've got the comm system back online, at least partially." Hope surged within me. "Can you get a signal out?" He nodded, fingers flying across the console as he worked to establish a connection. The seconds felt like hours as we waited, the silence of the outpost surrounding us like a heavy fog. Come on," I muttered under my breath, my heart racing. Finally, Alvarez looked up, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "I've got a connection, sending a distress signal now." As the signal transmitted, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We were not entirely alone. Help was on the way. But even as I celebrated this small victory, the weight of my thoughts lingered. In that moment of respite, I gazed out of the observation window, the alien landscape stretching out before me, its beauty marred by our battle. I thought of the sound waves we had harnessed, once used as a weapon, but now offering a glimmer of hope for communication. The realization struck me. Sound, like technology, was neither inherently good nor evil. It was a tool, and its impact depended on how we chose to wield it. We had the power to reshape our understanding, to transform sound into something that could connect rather than divide. "Hey, Marcus," Alvarez called, pulling me from my reverie. "We've got a response." I turned, adrenaline surging as I approached the console. The screen flickered, displaying a message from the rescue ship. "Caltrus Outpost, this is the UNS Voyager. We received your distress signal and are on our way. Estimated arrival in 2 hours. Prepare for extraction." The relief was overwhelming. "We did it," I exclaimed, a smile breaking across my face. Jenkins stepped beside me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "But we need to discuss what's next, Marcus. We can't go back to using sound technology the same way we did before." "I know," I replied, my mind racing. "This experience has shown me that we need to be responsible. We have a duty to use our knowledge for good, to seek understanding rather than power." As we gathered together, discussing our plans for the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie and purpose. We had faced the darkness together, and now we stood on the precipice of something new, a chance to redefine our approach to technology and sound. The distant hum of engines echoed through the air, growing louder as the UNS Voyager approached. I could see the outline of the ship against the horizon, a beacon of hope against the backdrop of the alien world. As the ship landed and the ramp lowered, I felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. We were leaving behind Caltrus, but the lessons we had learned would follow us. Stepping forward, I took one last look at the outpost, the site of our triumphs and failures. The sound of the engines faded, replaced by the quiet whispers of the wind, a reminder of the balance we must strive for. In that moment, I understood that sound held the power to connect us, to forge bonds that transcended our differences. It was a reminder that technology, in all its forms, could be a force for good, if we chose to use it wisely. As we boarded the rescue ship, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but we were ready to face them. We would carry our experiences with us, forging a path toward a future where sound could be a tool for unity rather than division. With one final glance back at Caltrus, I stepped into the ship, the doors sealing behind me. The engines roared to life, and as we lifted off, I knew that our story was far from over. Together, we would harness the power of sound to build a better future, one that embraced the dual nature of technology, guided by the understanding that it was not the tool itself that mattered, but how we chose to use it. And as the ship ascended into the sky, I felt a surge of hope, knowing that we would carry our lessons forward into the stars.